A new father has arrived. For millennia, birth has been almost exclusively the domain of women. Men had a different, more distant role to play. But for the first time in our history, most fathers are participating in the birth of their children. They're also expanding their involvement in the modern family. Because of this, fathers today face new challenges. This was an excerpt from the first paragraph of the book we're going to talk about with the author, Patrick Houser. He's a grandfather and father of 2 sons. It was the birth of his first son which revealed to him the need to understand birth more fully. His second son, 1980, was the first documented water birth in the United States. This has informed him of his life's work and led him to nearly 25 years of passionate advocacy for birth choices. He has a degree in marketing, has owned a natural health center, and for 10 years ran his construction firm in Austin, Texas. Today, he's the director of the Source Foundation International, a UK registered charity promoting health and choice from preconception to birth and throughout his life. Patrick is also a speaker. He writes articles, and he's the author of the Fathers to Be Handbook, a roadmap to the transition of fathering. He's also, that book has been published in the UK, and now it's available in the United States. Good morning, Patrick, and welcome to Whole Mother.
Good morning, Pat. Thank you for having me on.
We're so pleased. Well, tell us a little bit about this evolutionary process of fathering.
Well, it's interesting. It's more than just fathers because it's about a family. And pre-industrial revolution, the family was a unit, and an extended unit at that. And so families worked together, played together, lived together in a much different form than we now have. And then when the Industrial Revolution came along, all of a sudden families were separated. The factory work and the migration to the cities, I think, 1900, 90% of people worked and lived on farms and 10% in the cities, and then that was exactly reversed within less than a century. So we have undergone an evolution with the family, and that's had significant repercussions. But what has happened now since mid-ish 20th century, with fathers entering the birthing room, there's been a metamorphosis. My particular father was sort of an ex parte member of the family. He believed himself to be head of the family. I grew up in Ohio, was born in 1948. However, my mother was the one who actually did the heavy lifting in all regards. She ran the family. She ran the household. She, purchased the clothes, the groceries, did all of the things that parents do. It was a very traditional family. And yet, when it came time for me to become a father and have children and such, 1976 was my first child. We were living in the Missouri Ozarks, and we had no intention to be near a hospital for that birth, and had a local midwife who was underground because home births were illegal there. Midwifery was illegal, not home births. And she was brilliant, and yet it was a very, very tough birth for all three of us, and I mean that literally. And about a year later, we kind of woke up and said, whoa, what was that? And did some therapeutic work, and, kind of became part of a new wave of understanding of who we are as humans, and how did we get to be the way we are, and why does birth matter, and all of that. So then that led to, 4 years later, the water birth, which was a profound thing to receive my son from his mother in the water. And that's kind of a personal and a sociological picture of how I got here.
It's amazing to kind of look back and see how most of us began. We have really evolved.
Yes.
Well, tell us a little more about fathering, and how did you get so interested in supporting and helping fathers to look at their role?
Well, as an interesting little footnote, we were on the Phil Donahue show in 1982 when he was the Oprah Winfrey of the 80s.
Because of the water birth?
Yes, because of the water birth, because we filmed it. And so we did an entire Phil Donahue show. But interestingly, Houston, Texas was the only city in the nation to bar that program because there was, wait for it, nudity. There was, my wife was giving birth, right? How do you give birth with your clothes on? So they banned the program, and it was not shown in Houston, Texas.
Wow.
But anyway, I guess through my own family experience, my father was, very wounded from his experience with his own father. And so a certain amount of that was communicated. And yet what was also communicated within my family was the value and the importance of family and children, 6 children in my family. So we were, definitely, but it was a team sport. And it was a very significant thing that kind of rubbed off. I mean, there was healing to do from the generations of unconscious behavior and passing on of patterns and all of that. But what I got underneath that, too, was the value of it. And so over the years, I was involved with birth and therapeutic work in different ways. And then 5 years ago, a colleague of mine, Elmer Postal, we were in a support group one morning in a training session, and what came out of his mouth, he had a newborn, was that one day he might like to work with expectant dads because he found it to be a very profound experience for him. Well, when those words came out of his mouth, every cell in my body woke up and said, holy smokes, this is what I've been prepared for. And then, so that was sort of the beginning. I came home from this retreat and went to Google and put into Google fathers to be, which is our cultural phrase for expectant dads. Now, I also say in my book, I think it's the 3rd line, if she's pregnant, you're already a father. And that is really important, and maybe we'll come back to that. But when I put that into Google, I wanted to put my fingers on the pulse. The Oracle of Delphi has nothing on Google. Google is the sage of our time. It will tell us everything going on in the world. And Google came back and said to me, did you mean mothers to be?
Wow.
It's like I had misspelled the word.
It didn't exist.
It did not exist. Now, Google can't lie. Google can't make stuff up. All Google can do is report on what's factual with billions of bits of information. There was no recognition of expectant fathers, none whatsoever.
Amazing.
And I wept and I jumped for joy at the same time. It's like, wow, I've got 5 lifetimes of work ahead of me. And then at the same time, it was like, holy, can it be this bad? Can we be this remiss as a culture to actually have no reference to expectant fathers on the World Wide Web? And so I started doing more research, and part of what I discovered was that all of these most of the websites, of course, are based on women and birth and doulas and, all the different elements of education and all of the things going on with birth. However, anytime they did bother to mention the other half of a family, I call it the F word, go ahead, use the F word, is that the only time they bothered to mention him, it was birth partner, rest of the family, other family members. They were using euphemisms almost without exception. Totally, entirely euphemisms.
Yes.
And so, but then I found a piece of research that said, if you don't name dad, if you don't use the word dad or father, a man cannot find himself. So we don't call our own parents, we call them mom and dad, mother and father. We don't call them mom and birth partner. That's not his name. His name is father, expectant father, dad. That's who he is. And so for him to be identified and to participate more fully, we have to name him.
Yes.
And that's a really important clue to birth professionals.
He's so much more than just a birth coach.
Yes, indeed. And the word coach, I don't really appreciate. I mean, if you ask a man, who's the coach, in a cultural sporting session, well, he's the most experienced guy in the room, right? Yes. He's the one who directs all the action. He knows what to do. He's completely solid. He's the most educated and informed about the sport. Well, the father, an expectant father, is the exact opposite of that.
Yes.
So we have a challenge. I have a challenge with that phrase, that title.
We're going to take a break. Whole Mother will return. Stay with us.
You're listening to Pacifica Radio, KPFT Houston. The time is 6:45, and here's a traffic and weather update. There is a stalled bus on 59, the Southwest Freeway, in the HOV lane northbound at the 610 West Loop. And there's a 2-vehicle accident on Highway 249, Tomball Parkway, southbound at Hollister. 3 main lanes are affected. And a 2-vehicle accident on 45 North Freeway, northbound at Airline Drive. 2 main lanes and 1 shoulder lane are blocked. And a 1-vehicle accident on 45 Gulf Freeway, southbound at FM 518. 1 frontage road lane is affected. The current temperature is 81 degrees with a heat index of 88 degrees. Skies are clear. Humidity is 74%. And today will be mostly sunny with a high of 103 and a low of 76. There is a heat advisory in effect until 7 p.m. tomorrow. And now we return to Whole Mother with Pat Jones and her guest Patrick Houser.
As a father evolves into fathering, in your book you talked about the gifts that dads, men, get from their own fathers.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, one way I put it, there's I don't use the duality very much, good and bad, but in this case I'll say there are good gifts and there are less useful gifts. And so some gifts may look like, a rusty bike with a flat tire, and other gifts may be heartwarming and long-lasting from a different perspective. And so the opportunity with pregnancy and birth and early fathering is to notice when these gifts are becoming more visible, let's say. And there may be times when you have a recollection of your own father holding you, or some event in your childhood with your father, going fishing or whatever it is. But there are other times, and this will happen almost invariably, where you will have what I call a disproportionate response to a particular event, whether it's breastfeeding, whether it's being left out of this relationship, feeling alone and lonely because you've been replaced, it seems. There's all these things that happen during this time. It's in a very emotional time, and so it's important that fathers kind of pay attention to how they're feeling during this time. And men aren't raised the same way as women, and so we have a less developed emotional vocabulary. We have typically less access to that element of who we are. And yet, if there's anything that will punctuate our emotional body, it is pregnancy, birth, and this early parenting time. And then as the child grows up, it will be activated more in different ways. But get support. Talk to your friends. Get psychological support if you need counseling, that sort of thing. Mentoring. It's a really important thing to pay attention to that early time and recognize what values you have received and what things you've received that you'd like to leave behind now. And one way I talk about this is, how do you want to be remembered as a father? And so that's kind of a brain stopper where a man goes, how do I want to be remembered? Well, what does that have to do with me? Well, actually, it has everything to do with you. Because if you actually pay attention to how you are with your children, that is what your children will remember. It won't be about how much money you earn to buy them the new whatever. It will be about the quality of time you spent with them and the heart connection, and that's what's the most valuable. And so that's what they will remember.
Yes.
That's how they will remember you.